In this series of videos, we're going to look at changing the subject of the formula or rearranging the subject of the formula. When we're doing this, you need to think about basically the process of solving general equations, because it's the exact same thinking that we're going to apply to rearranging the subject of the formula. In this first example, we've been given the formula r equals st plus u, and let's imagine we want to change the subject of the formula to t. By saying that I want to change the subject to the formula to t, what I essentially mean is after I have rearranged everything, I want to have a t equals equation. I want to have t equals on one side on its own. So first thing to note, we've got r equals st plus u. We notice that we've got the t on the right hand side, and more generally we work with the variable that we're looking for on the left hand side. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite the equation round the other way. St plus u equals r. My goal is to make it a t equals equation. But first I need to get rid of other variables that are with that on that side of the equation. So here I've got a plus u. I don't want a plus u, and we would need to undo any adding or subtracting first. So the opposite of adding u is subtracting u. So we're going to subtract u from both sides. So that will leave us with st equals r minus u. Just exactly like how we would solve an equation so far. I want it to be t equals on the left hand side. I've got st equals. So I don't want to have that s multiplying the t, so I'm going to divide both sides by s. By doing that, these s's would cancel out and I'll be left with t. So I can just rewrite that as t equals r minus u divided by s. I have changed the subject of the formula to t. It is t equals, and I just undid my adding first, then I undid any multiplying. Let's imagine we are working with the volume of a sphere. Remember, the volume of a sphere is 4 over 3 pi r cubed, and let's imagine we want to figure out what the radius is. So we want to make r the subject of the formula. So just as before, we're just going to rewrite the left and the right the other way around, so that we've got the variable we're looking for on the left hand side. So 4 over 3 pi r cubed equals v, the volume. So I've got no adding or subtracting to undo. I do have a fraction, and I want to get rid of the denominator of the fraction first. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. I do that because these 3's cancel out on the left hand side. So I'm going to have 4 pi r cubed equals v times 3. I'm just going to write that as 3v. Okay, now on the left hand side I've got 4 pi r cubed. So this 4 pi, these are both values, these are multiplying the r cubed, so I can just divide both sides by 4 pi. By doing so, these will cancel down. I'll be left with r cubed equals 3v over 4 pi. I am not finished yet though. I'm just going to put this over to the side here. I'm not finished. My goal is to make it r equals. I want the subject of the formula to be r, not r cubed. So if we link this back into our surds, if we have something cubed equals a value, to figure out what the value is on its own, we can take the cubed root. So we're going to take the cubed root of both sides, and that's going to be 3v over 4 pi. So to figure out what the radius is, if we know the volume, we do the cubed root of 3 times the volume divided by 4 lots of pi. Okay, so the one thing here that might be slightly different is if we had the cube, or if this was r squared equals this, we would do the square root of this. But because it's r cubed, we're doing the cubed root. Okay, here I've been asked to rearrange the subject of the formula to y. So I want to make it a y equals. Once again, I've got the y on the left hand side, so I'm just going to rewrite it. so that it's on the left hand side. Sorry, I think it's supposed to be. It was on the right hand side to start with. Okay, so I have got a z on the left. I don't want it there, so I'm going to subtract z from both sides. I'm going to be left with minus y equals 5x plus 3 minus z. I want it to be y equals. I don't want it to be minus y equals. So see a wee workaround to just make it y equals. See if we multiply everything by minus 1, we're going to have y equals, and what essentially happens is all the signs switch. So it'll be minus 5x minus 3 plus z. I showed this example just for the sake of this purpose here. If you're left with negative and the letter you're looking for, if you multiply both sides through it by minus 1, you should get it as the letter or the variable that you're looking for. Okay, here let's imagine we have to change the subject to the formula to x. So first thing to note, we do have x on the left hand side, but it's at the bottom of a fraction. And when I'm rearranging the subject to the formula, I want it to be x equals. I don't want to have any fractions involved. So just as before, to undo any fractions, we would multiply both sides by the number or the value at the bottom. We would multiply both sides by the denominator. So that's what we're going to do here. By doing so, we're going to essentially cancel out these x's from the left hand side. So I'm going to be left with 5 equals 3y times x, which is 3xy. Okay, now I've got x's on the top. Okay, so I want to have x equals, so I'm just going to rearrange it again. I'm just going to have it as 3xy equals 5, because I like having my letter on the left hand side, my variable on the left. And on the left hand side I've got 3 times x times y. I just want x, so I can divide both sides by 3y, which will give me x equals 5 divided by 3y. If we had a question like this, or if one of our steps eventually got down to this part here, the square root of x is equal to 3, we would want to figure out what x is. To undo the square root, what we would need to do is we would need to square both sides. Because if we just link this back to surds, so I'm just going to do a wee note here, this is not part of the question, but if we do the square root of x times the square root of x, we would get back to x. So if we would square the left hand side and the right hand side, we would eventually come back to x equals 9. So if you have a square root, to undo it, square both sides. Okay, in this last example we're going to try and rearrange the subject of the formula to n. Okay, so far this doesn't look very good. We've got n is under a square root, it's at the bottom of a fraction. But we'll just approach it as we normally do. We want to have n on the left, so I'm just going to rewrite this first. 5/7 m over n equals rs. Okay, the first thing we need to get rid of is this fraction. We don't want this fraction here. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 7. I'm going to be left with 5 square root of m over n equals 7rs. Okay, now I've got 5 in front of my square root. I don't want it there. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5, which will leave me with the square root of m over n equals 7rs divided by 5. Okay, I'm just going to make this a bit smaller just for space. So I've got the square root of m over n equals 7rs over 5. So we've now got the stage where we've got a square root that we don't want. And just like in the last example, to get rid of a square root, we should square both sides. Because if we did the square root of m over n times the square root of m over n, we would get back to m over n. Okay, so we are going to have m over n, and we're going to square the top, so that's going to be 49 r squared s squared over 25. Okay, so we're getting there, Ultimately, I want it to be n equals. I want n to be the subject of the formula. At the moment, n is at the bottom of a fraction. So we don't want it at the bottom, so to get rid of it from the bottom, we're going to multiply both sides by n. That will leave us with m equals 49 r squared s squared n over 25. Okay, I'm just going to rewrite this around the other way because I've now got n on the top. So 49 r squared s squared n over 25 equals m. We want to get rid of this fraction, so multiply both sides by 25. I'm just going to do more working up here. So 49 r squared s squared n equals 25m. And essentially, whilst we've got a lot of terms here, all these terms are just multiplying the n. So I can divide both sides by 49 r squared s squared, and I am going to do that to the right hand side as well. I don't have space, but the working, like this working, would also go in here as well. When I rearrange that, I will be left with n equals 25m divided by 49 r squared s squared. This was a particularly difficult example, but if you just undo the things that we don't want first and we follow it through methodically, it may take some time, it may be a wee bit messy at times, but we can get there, and we can certainly pick up a lot of marks on rearranging the subject of the formula questions.